first of our Future Napiers committee for this term. I'd like to start by asking, I think we have a full complement, no apologies. Are there any conflicts of interest? Lovely. Any announcements by the Mayor? Thank you. No announcements by myself. I'd just like to call for any minor matters that are not on the agenda. Any councillors? No? Lovely. We'll move over to announcements by management. Richard.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to welcome Luke Johnson to the council. He's employed with us in the resource consents and our compliance area. We've done a little bit of a change there where we've brought some teams together, and Luke's taking the mantle of looking after that department. So yeah, Luke, I wonder if you can say a few words about yourself.
Luke Johnson. I've come over from the property group. My wife and family and I have relocated here from Australia in September last year. I've got 16 years experience as a town planner, and looking forward to the challenge of working with Napier City Council.
Welcome. Thank you, Luke. All right. Can I have a confirmation of the minutes, Mover? Or just referring to no minutes needed? Perfect. Okay, we'll move into our first agenda item, the Building Act changes, and I'd like to welcome Malcolm, who is going to speak to us about this paper. Thank you, Malcolm.
Morning, everyone. So I was requested to write a paper on the proposed additions to the exempt building work.
Maybe if you can just pull this a little closer, Malcolm.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll start again. My paper's on the proposed exemption extensions to the Building Act. They haven't actually taken effect yet, and we're just asked to see what sort of impact it would have on us and our team. So we went back through the last 12 months worth of consents to see what would fall under the new exemptions, and there were 19 building consents, and that represented less than 1 or 1.5% of the total consent numbers, and there was a potential revenue loss of 13,500, which again was very minor in the scheme of things. It's worth pointing out that revenue loss wouldn't actually be realised unless we actually got to the end of all our building consents, which we never do. So in essence, there isn't a loss.
Are you able, Malcolm, just to summarise for us what those new exemptions are?
Certainly. Proposed exemptions.
Proposed.
Okay. What we have is up to 30 square metre single-storey detached buildings such as sleep-outs. Should be noted that there is no plumbing allowed in those. Ground-mounted solar array panels, for which we've never had a consent. Carports up to 40 square metres. Previously they were up to 20 square metres. Ground floor awnings up to 30 square metres. Ground floor verandas and porches up to 30 square metres. Outdoor fireplaces, flexible water storage bladders, small pipe supporting structures and short span bridges, and single storey pole sheds and hay barns in rural zones.
Fantastic, thank you. Do we have any councillor questions? Councillor Brown?
Thank you for that, Malcolm. I was just wondering, could you outline what risks the community are taking on by not going through the consenting process?
Okay, so even though it's exempt work, people still can apply for a building consent. Firstly, they have that option. The government, with the exemptions, have stated that, in their opinion, it is low-risk building. So there doesn't tend to be a lot of risk associated with them, particularly if they actually do bring in the must be designed by a structural engineer and the work supervised by a licensed building practitioner.
Councillor, we'll finish Councillor Brown and then Councillor Price.
Thank you, I've got two more. So what would the process be if someone wanted to update their property file with the improvements they've made?
So once the work's actually done, they can provide us with as-built documentation and we will put it on the property file. We prefer it to be once the work is done so that A, we know it actually went ahead, and B, it didn't change as they were doing it.
Brilliant. And do you perceive any long-term risks for the city's built environment through this?
From a building perspective, no, because it is low-risk work. The more likely impact is to be on Luke's team with the planning side of things. People hear that it's exempt from a building consent and just think they can go and do it. They forget they also have to comply with the district plan and RMA. So there could be site coverage issues, height in relation to boundary issues, building over easements. People just hear no consent building and off they go.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a comment from John, but I'll take Councillor Price's question first.
Just a clarification, if you built a small outhouse and you put a toilet and shower into it, how would that work for consent?
The plumbing needs a consent. So you could build the exempt building and then apply for a consent to put the plumbing into it, or you could just apply for consent to do the whole shooting box.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. John, your comment, and then Councillor Simpson.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, it's just worth probably teasing out a point that Malcolm did make about the potential for some of these structures to be built over easements. They may be easements over our public sewer or stormwater, and that would be a risk to the developer or the builder of those structures, as if we required access to our sewer for any reason, then we'd probably have rights to dismantle. There is a bit of a risk there. That's probably worth mentioning.
Follow-up question from Mayor Wise, and then I'll come to you, Councillor.
Yeah, so with regards to that, have we got any sort of process or plans in place to ensure or encourage that people are going to inquire with the town planning team, or, you know, how can we mitigate this risk?
Probably one for me.
Richard?
I think that this is really something that the whole of the country will be thinking the same thing. While John's raised the easement issue, it's very much from the planning point of view, we are very confident that they will bypass that, and because they won't understand that they require a planning consent that's different from a building consent, and that's quite understandable, I think. So I think that's something that will be firmly part of whatever process, which is a little bit unclear of how they're going to actually make these changes come into force. But there must be some process of scrutiny prior to that happening, and this issue is undoubtedly going to come to the fore, if not from local government New Zealand, but certainly from the councils.
It's actually worth noting as well that there's already a raft of exempt work. This is just slightly bigger buildings than is already exempt. When we do get inquiries, obviously we talk them through the process and tick off the planning and the council services side of things. They don't have to come to us to ask whether the work is exempt. It's actually up to the owner to determine that, but a lot of people do come through us, so we do capture quite a bit of it that way anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
Yeah, ironically, my questions have more or less been answered, but I'd probably suggest that we need to strengthen our web pages around what people are permitted to do, what the exemptions include, and our preferred courses of action around protection of council facilities that are buried underground.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. I think that's a really good point, Malcolm, around the kind of communication we've got out there around not only these proposed changes, but any existing exemptions, and also, I suppose, making that point that council offers a free advice service essentially for determining where people's proposed works sit.
Yeah, so we have links to the MB website, which is that there's the guidance document for the current exemptions. It is planned that once the new exemptions actually become law, they will update the guidance document. In the guidance document, it does say that they need, just because they don't need building consent, they have to consider planning. And it also states very clearly that even though it's exempt work, it must still comply with the building code.
Okay, thank you. Just a follow-up question from Councillor Simpson and then Councillor McGrath.
Yeah, just based on that comment, and thank you, Murray, for your Malcolm, for your commentary. I did that on Sunday, didn't I? I would still prefer, rather than just links off to other websites, I would still prefer that our websites contain even just bullet points.
Yeah, it does.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor McGrath and then Richard.
I'm just wondering if this is an opportunity for us to be a little bit more proactive in the space following on from Councillor Simpson. We must have a list of all the building firms that we deal with over the last 12 months, and even the likes of the Megastore and Carter's, to just forward some information onto them to say, look, the rules have changed, but come and have a look at our website, clarify what they are. I just think that's an opportunity for us to front foot it. Because I know, I've spoken to people and they're all ready to go. And I said, well, hey, there's rules you have to follow.
Yeah, we have to be a little bit careful because from an accreditation perspective, it's easier for us to link to the source of the truth being MB rather than us trying to update all of our stuff, because we actually get audited on this as well. So it's something we learned very early in the piece, that it's actually easier to link to the lawmaker rather than duplicate and have to update and ensure that we're current with all of our stuff.
Yeah, I certainly accept that, but I'm just wondering if it's worth us proactively going out and saying, hey, look at the MB site, rather than waiting for it to happen and
We do that. We point everyone to the MB site, and anyone ringing in, we talk them through our side, and also there we give them as much information as we can.
Thank you. Mr. Miniker?
Just a quick comment. In terms of the easements, they are on the title, so they are a little bit easier to. Most people should be aware of that in terms of what their title is doing, and you do have significant powers to remove anything that's covering an easement. So I think that the likelihood of someone doing that is the same as it is now in terms of putting stuff on an easement. The difficulty is if people confuse more the planning and the building consents. But as I say, that's a nationwide issue.
Without any more questions on the first part of the resolution, Malcolm, I wonder if you'd just like to touch on the second part of the resolution, which is around the partnership you've been forming and the building team processing.
Certainly. So in 2015, when we first did a business case to go to an electronic end-to-end consenting system, part of that was that we saw an opportunity to process for other councils, resource share if you like, and that was part of that business case. We ended up going in 2017 with the Alpha 1 end-to-end consenting system, and currently there are 16 other councils that use this system. In 2018, I think off the top of my head, I presented to a forum we had to those councils that would everyone be open to the idea of Napier resourcing their building consents team to process for them instead of them using contractors. And the consensus in the room was yes, everyone was very open to that idea. So late last year, my counterpart at Selwyn District Council was absolutely getting slammed with consent numbers, so we recruited and started processing for Selwyn. So the revenue we gained from one of my people processing for Selwyn has enabled me to put a trainee position in place, which is for succession planning for my processing team, and it was essentially a walk before you run. So that was our trial to see whether my assumptions actually did work and that it was going to work for everybody. So Vanessa, that's my Selwyn counterpart, and I've now been doing it since March this year, and I can report back that it's going very well. They're extremely happy with the service we're providing them, particularly during lockdown when my processing team, it was business as usual because we're cloud-based. They were just processing from home like any other given workday. And Selwyn's consent numbers were, instead of dropping, they went up. So they were just getting slammed with consents. And we ended up actually having 3 people processing for them at a peak. That dropped back down to 2, and as of today, I'm down to 1 because one of my inspection team has gone on parental leave, and she was processing for Selwyn until yesterday when she goes on leave. So, yeah, I'm open to any questions on this.
So So you, just for clarification, Malcolm, you plan to investigate growing that side of the processing team, and that will come back through council's resourcing decisions around annual or long-term plan, or when will we see the result of your explorations?
Okay, yes, my proposal is to firstly go out to the other alpha councils and see whether there is a need. Secondly, I need to see whether I can resource it, because my technical team must have a Regulation 18 qualification for accreditation and then competency assessed. So it's not as simple as just going and picking someone off the tools and putting them in the seat and saying process. We have to see whether we can actually resource this as well.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from councillors? Councillor Mawson.
Hey, Malcolm. I guess just one of the questions that the public might want answered on this would going to other councils and doing the work for them, would that slow down our process?
No. The whole idea around this is that the revenue I receive from the other councils actually funds extra positions for Napier. So I can actually put more bulk to my processing team, for example. My end vision, because we have a statutory 20 working day time frame, I would like Napier's 20 days to be 10 days. And I can do that by over-resourcing my team being funded by other councils. So it's a cost-neutral effect to council. And then every day quicker we get a building consent out the door, there's an economic flow on for the community because the project starts quicker. Suppliers are supplying materials quicker, builders are working, projects are opening quicker, so yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson, then Councillor Tapney and Councillor Bogue.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I don't have an issue with the proposal. I think it is appropriate that we see a proper business case around it, and because of commercial sensitivity, because we will be competing with others, I'm sure, other councils that will be interested in the same game. I'm happy to see that come through public excluded so that we get a detailed look at the costs, because I think it is important that that our ratepayers don't subsidise the costs of other councils. And more importantly, I'd like to see the risks around employing staff and what happens if the workload doesn't exist going forward, so that I'd like to see a real mitigation case around that, how we will, again, protect our ratepayers from from costs while we're not servicing other local authorities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Simpson. Comment from Mr Minnick?
Through the chair, the reality is that the likelihood of work dropping off in Napier and being left with too many building inspectors is a lot higher than if it's mitigated across. So I'm sure that point's not lost on you, but that's the whole beauty in the process, is that there will always be a Tauranga or a Palmerston North or some place that is requiring their consents to be, I guess, done quicker than what they can do with their existing staff. And I think it's particularly, can't remember if Malcolm touched this point, but the building industry itself is an ageing population, I guess, in terms of the staff that are coming into those roles. So the country's kind of struggling to get people into those roles. Yeah.
Thank you. I have a comment from the Chief Executive, Mr Marshall.
And I think across, if Council's also thinking about when we're coming to the final annual plan sign-off, as we've sort of talked about a few times already, there are going to be a number of issues for us in reforecasting the budget in total. So this should be one item amongst that reforecast in total, because of the process we've been through to get to a draft annual plan. By the time we get to framing up the final annual plan, we are going to have done a substantive reforecast. This will be one component of that reforecast, along with the risks and benefits of doing it. So I think if you keep it in that context, rather than thinking that it needs to be a separate standalone item that comes back, it ought to come back in that budget final annual plan consideration.
Thank you. Councillor Tapney, you had a question?
Actually, no, I'll withdraw my question, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Just a question, if you don't mind, about the proposed changes to the Building Act. I just wondered, where did that come from? Was it something that the government just made up? Was it a recommendation from Solgum or from the industry? And was it part of a whole lot of recommendations? I mean, it seems to me good news, a good thing for them to do. I just wondered politically where that came from.
Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise because it just popped out on a Sunday and we didn't actually know about it until the Monday. So I would suggest it's a bit of political grandstanding maybe in COVID.
Thank you. Chief Executive, Mr Marshall.
We are being recorded. There were a whole pile of measures that have been considered in this space around the COVID response, and some of them have been battered around for some time in the past. And so I think the expediency of the process of COVID was around the consideration about how will this help accelerate some process. So, to what degree you want to call that politics versus response. We have seen a varied array of different responses through COVID to all manner of things. And so you should see it in that general context of responses, in my view.
Okay, comment from Mr Miniker and then Councillor Tapani.
Just building on that, there's been other initiatives really to get the economy going around the fast tracking some of the big resource management applications using a sole judge, for example. So I think it should be seen in the context of a group of policy initiatives to try and get the economy going post-COVID.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tapani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question to Malcolm, if I may. Kia ora, Malcolm. First of all, I just want to acknowledge your foresight and your lead in this space to leverage an investment of council to create new opportunities to generate revenue across our Alpha 1 committees. So that's a fantastic piece of initiative that you've driven, and obviously based on the report is already returning dividends, not only for Napier but for your team particularly. So with the questions that have come from the floor from our other councillors, so I share some of those concerns. So I was wondering if you could give us some confidence around, one, we've got some fantastic feedback here from our other councils, Alpha 1s. So are we anticipating potentially that there might be growth and more councils being drawn to the fire by the work that you're doing? Or, and the other question is, what's your confidence around managing those ebbs and flows that Councillor Simpson was referring to?
Okay, so part of my initial proposal was that the larger councils such as Tauranga and Selwyn, who are Alpha 1 users, it doesn't really make sense for them to resource at their peaks because as soon as they have a drop-off, what do they do with their additional staff? So A, they can't seem to recruit, and B, they plug the gap with contractors at the moment. The appetite is to use councils over contractors. It's just most councils are not in the position where they can recruit. So they're all struggling to recruit, to be honest. We're all fishing from the same pond with the Regulation 18 qualifications. And as Richard previously said, most BCAs are an ageing workforce. So as people are exiting, they are struggling to bring people in. We've positioned Napier slightly different. We made a conscious decision back in 2014 to try and recruit a younger building consents team. So we have probably got one of the youngest teams in New Zealand, and that's actually, it's worked for a number of reasons. One, I've got young, hungry people who are doing the job for the right reason, and we've invested in them, we've trained them, we've got them through the Regulation 18 qualification while there was still a prior learning option and you didn't have to pay for it. That option has now gone. So we've positioned ourselves quite nicely in that space. Going forward, we seem to be able to recruit. And now I don't know whether that's because the base we've already built or we're just getting lucky. We haven't had an issue to date. Hopefully it will continue. But that is my comment about it is dependent on us being able to resource this. So given that the larger councils resource somewhere below their peak, given that they don't really like using contractors who tend to be their ex-staff who are now charging them an exorbitant amount of money, there is an opportunity in that space. And I think we've seen that opportunity before others. or if others have, they haven't been able to resource it or push it through. So what I'm hoping is that we can be a leader in there and that we can establish ourselves. Crystal ball gazing, if there is only one electronic consent system through New Zealand, councils can process for everybody, and if we're already operating in that space with a reputation that says we're pretty good at it, that puts us in a pretty good place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Malcolm. If there's no further questions from councillors, just a flag to governance, I'd like to include a new B and D in our resolutions, just based on the conversation. So A remains the same. Note the proposed changes to the Building Act and their minimal impacts for council. Include a new B. Note a review of our public resources and website will be undertaken to ensure passive guidance on exemptions is clear. To ensure passive guidance on exemptions is clear.
What do you mean by passive guidance?
That's where people seek information from us without, through the website or through our printed materials, rather than proactively approaching a member of the team. B remains the same and becomes C. Direct officers to explore the possibility of growing the building team further to process applications for Alpha 1 councils, and note a new D, which is note the results of the building team Alpha 1 exercise will be reported back to council through our annual plan. Do I have a mover for those? Oh. Thank you. We're just going to get that up on the screen, and I note Councillor Brown's intention to move. Okay. Just a small removal of the word passive. Happy to do that. Okay, moved from the chair, seconded by Councillor Brown. Is there any discussion to the motion? There being none, I'll put the motion. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Any against? Carried. Thank you very much, Malcolm.
Thank you very much.
All right, we'll move on to our second paper, the resource consent activity. So I'd just like to introduce this paper before Paul has an opportunity to speak. So this will be a standing item on our future Napier committee. It will be a kind of what's on the books for us in terms of resource consent processes that are, or consent processes that are of interest to council and may be of interest to the community as well. They are intended to be an update of where they sit in the process, so it's a purely factual reporting. We obviously can't speak to developers' intention and the like, but with that in mind, I'll hand over to Paul if you wouldn't mind introducing the paper for us.
Thanks very much, Councillor Brosnan. And welcome to the inaugural resource consent activity item. Hopefully every 6 weeks I'm going to provide you with an update on either approved or current, exciting, large, controversial resource consents. So the idea is just to give you an idea of what's happening out there in terms of economic activity across residential, commercial, industrial.
Paul, just before you carry on, I just wanted to make one point through the chair, that the information that we're giving you is in the public arena. So there is nothing, we don't want to go into things that are not in the public arena. So I just wanted you all to be aware of that, and the questions that Paul can answer is only on information that is already in the public arena, and that's to respect the process and the rights of developers and everybody in terms of being able to, have a fair process under the applications they may want to progress.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Yeah, in terms of being in the public arena, that's meaning we've got formal resource consent applications in council, so they are publicly available. I'll take my report as read, but I'll just quickly go through some of these, all of the applications. Starting with the approved resource consents. Pretty exciting one is the proposed new hotel on the at 161 Marine Parade, corner of Albion and Marine Parade. It's in behind the Tremaines building. That was subject to a original approval back in 2018. It's for a 5-level hotel accommodating 59 hotel units. It was originally approved back in 2018. And as with the case with big developments, as the design process proceeds, changes happen to the building. And this was the case with this one. There were design elements that did require what's called a variation to the resource consent. So that was lodged with council and assessed in terms of its exceeding the maximum height for the zone. The height and the external urban design issues associated with the proposal were the main issues. And they were significantly assessed by the applicant and by council. This application was approved in June this year, which is quite reassuring. Some of these bigger developments have fallen by the wayside since COVID kicked in, but I've been told this developer is keen to move on. I'm not too sure where he's at with a building consent application, which would be the next stage in this process. The next development is in Te Awa, part of the Te Awa structure plan area, where we have approved a 19-lot subdivision. The address is Willowbank Avenue, but these 19 lots are actually on Erickson Road. It's in a residential zone, and these are standard residential sections which will just form continuation of the Te Awa development. And this site forms part of a larger block, which I'll just go into a bit later. So yeah, that was approved June this year. Another one, also within Te Awa, is 35 Kenny Road. It's a site on the corner of Kenny and Erickson, where last year council approved in effect a suburban commercial shopping centre. This application was twofold. It was subdividing off the commercial block from the larger parent block. So the commercial block will now be able to be developed, and the bigger balanced lot will be now available for future residential development. That balanced lot will yield quite a number of residential sections. And that one was also approved in June this year. In terms of applications that we've received and are currently under subject to processing, we have quite a large development at 170 Taradale Road, which you would know as a former placemaker's site. The applicant is proposing 16 retail commercial tenancies on that site and 1 hospitality tenancy. The application is being processed by an external consultant and has so far been subject to a vigorous assessment around 3 water servicing, traffic safety, parking and visual assessments. The last sort of hurdle for them to cross is an assessment of the economic effects this proposal might have on other commercial centres in the city. So to that end, we require an economic analysis to be submitted to show how this development is not going to jeopardise, for example, the CBD or the fringe commercial areas or our smaller commercial areas. The nature of the retail proposed is for sort of larger trade-based activities. But we're just at a stage where we're trying to just refine exactly what can go into these tenancies. We don't want boutique retail. We want, trade sort of related items that are more suitable out of the CBDs, out of the fringe commercial area, and within this industrial zone. So once that economic analysis is done, our consultant will then proceed to preparing what's called a notification assessment to determine which way the application will proceed as a non-notified or proceed to a formal hearing. So, yeah, these things don't happen overnight, so probably in 6 weeks' time I'll be updating you again on where that one is. Also, again, back to 35 Kenny Road, the commercial centre. So they've got their consent in, they've got an approval in for the commercial units. One of these units included the cafe, and they now want to apply for it to have that cafe as a licensed premise, operating up till 9 o'clock at night. So that's currently being processed by staff, and obviously with any licensed premise there are attendant effects, and one of these being noise and intensity. So we are working through those issues at the moment. The last application, and probably one of the bigger residential subdivisions we've had for a while, is at 16 and 38 Willowbank Avenue. It's a site that is bounded by Willowbank to the west and Erickson Road to the east. It is also part of the Te Awa structure plan area. And the developer there would like to develop 162 residential lots and associated dwellings on those lots. The application has been quite contentious. The applicant wanted the development to be a gated community, which, as it sounds, there was a gate across the front, a security gate, and the intention was that the roads within the development would be vested in council. Legally, council cannot vest roads where there is a gate across that road. So council made it clear that unless the gate disappears, we will not be vesting the roads as council. The developer also wished to vest all infrastructure, water, sewer, stormwater, which would be under that road within council. Again, council have a difficulty around the issue of a road that's not vested, in effect a private road with council services underneath it. So council have made it very clear in their position they do not favour owning 3 waters assets that are located in private road. Council's position is that all 3 waters infrastructure should be held and managed either by council or held and managed in private ownership. And in this case, it would be a corporate body type model to manage and own what would be a pretty major asset. And council also have concerns around the long-term durability of a corporate body managing such a large asset. A notification decision has been made on this application, and that decision was that it should be publicly notified. We believe the effects are significant and the community should have a say in this sort of development. The applicant is basically deciding where to go with this one. They've got an option of taking our notification decision to the High Court to review, or they could proceed with notification. So we're just awaiting the applicant's decision on that.
Thank you, Paul.
That's
I
it.
have a question from Councillor Price and then Councillor Wright and Simpson.
Just taking it a bit further, in relation to the licensed premises, they're just subject to the normal rules applying for that?
They are, yeah.
Yeah,
It's just the fact it's still a residential zone.
yeah.
A licensed premise within a residential zone is a,
So how do they get on? Obviously, they want to apply quite early to know they can get that licence. Is that in the process now as well?
no, they haven't actually applied for a liquor licence. They're just going through the RMA, through the resource consent issue first.
I was just wondering how they tie in.
Yeah, well, obviously the liquor licence is subject to obtaining resource
Yeah,
consent
yeah.
for the activity. So they're trying to lock the resource consent in first. The applicant has assured council it's not going to be a full-on bar or a booze barn. It's a cafe / restaurant, which would be closing at 9 o'clock at night and servicing the local area.
Thank you, Councillor Wright.
Yes, I was just looking at the proposed lifestyle village gated community and wondering, there are examples of gated communities throughout New Zealand, and I was wondering if we had looked at how other councils had managed those developments.
Perhaps I could answer that, is that these are resource consent applications that need to be, I guess, scrutinised in terms of our district plan. So that is the matter at hand here. In terms of how the advice from the asset team, it is on our assets and the way that has been managed. So I think we just need to stick to the process of allowing that application to be submitted against our district plan and provide the advice as best we know it to this point as to what the next steps are, and it will go from there. But it needs to be done on its merits and not in a comparative scenario with others.
Councillor Simpson and Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Paul, for the level of detail and the style of the reporting. I do appreciate this sort of information coming to council. However, I'm just looking at the current statuses of some of these proposals, and I think we need to be mindful of what we're doing when we bring this information to council. And I think we have to be very careful that we're not attempting to influence outcomes. So therefore, I'd be very careful to make sure that these are firm proposals going forward, that when they're coming to council, because I think otherwise we run some level of risk. But other than that, I thought it was a really good idea to bring definitely the confirmed proposals to us so that we're aware of what's going on and other people can be aware, or our residents can be aware of implications or whatever it may be.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Simpson. And just to confirm that everything in this report are lodged applications for consent as proposed. So they are sitting in that public arena, and we won't be bringing to you any proposed pre-application discussions that we have with applicants. Councillor Bogue and then Councillor Mawson.
Yes, thank you for that.
Actually,
Oh, sorry.
apologies, Councillor Bogue. I've actually skipped Councillor Simpson. Councillor Taylor.
Nameplates out.
Yeah, you do.
New chair. I'm not quite sure who's going to answer this, might be John, but you talked about a gated community and road being within a gated community being a private road. Now, most retirement villages have a road and that is a private road. So how does it work as far as the infrastructure within a retirement village? Not being a gated community, but it being a private road.
I'll just quickly butt in. Developments like Somerset and Bupa, yeah, it is. They are in effect gated communities, but they are all under one ownership. and they do not have legal roads.
Oh, so that's the variation is that it's one
Yeah, it's
ownership
one entity.
against individual residential lots.
Yep,
Okay,
so
thanks
it's,
for that.
And that's a pretty good lens to put over the differences between some of these developments. I guess with regard to the existing situations that you raise, their Three Waters connections will be at the boundary. And so any reticulation within the private development will be private. So if they have problems within the private development, the onus is on them to repair or unblock or what have you. So particularly with the Willowbank situation where they want to have a gated community, basically locking a road, that doesn't meet the requirements of legislation for public roads. You cannot have a locked gate on a public road. So that's where this becomes unstuck, and despite a lot of advice on this, I think they're still looking to pursue a gated community. So we have to draw the line in terms of being able to access public assets under a private road. Just doesn't work.
And I'd just like to point out that the decision at the moment is around that it has been is going to be notified. There is no decision from council. So when Paul says we, it is only in evaluating the current application for the purposes of whether it should be notified or go through a non-notified process. It is not actually deciding on the application.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bogue.
Yes, thank you very much for that information. That's very helpful. I just want some clarification. Every week we get an email as councillors from Sarah Pilato giving a list of resource consents currently being processed on a particular date. I think the ones that you've listed today are included in that, but your list is not inclusive of all of them. Is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
So just to answer a question, the list that we are sent every week, is that public knowledge or is it something we get as councillors?
Again, that list doesn't go to the public, obviously, or it doesn't go beyond, but they are applications that have been lodged with council, so they are public information.
Okay. And I just wondered, I'm particularly interested that Kainga Ora is listed in one of those public lists, and I see that as being quite important, and it wasn't included in your list, but I assume that there will be some discussion about it or reporting on it at some stage, because there is a lot of community interest about social housing going up. So it's not a criticism.
Councillor Bowe, just a question of clarification. Is there any application made by Kainga Ora you're interested in receiving an update on?
No, I just thought that it was of such interest that it might be included in reports such as yours. There's one, I think, listed publicly at this stage. You may be able to let me know if there are others.
Yeah, I think the one you're referring to is probably Percy Spiller.
Yes, yeah.
It's a variation to an approved consent.
Right, yeah. No,
Yep.
just
But no, we can provide that additional reporting if needed.
Just also point out that some of those just don't have a resource consent. They are building consent only. So
Okay.
this is for resource consents.
Right. And the list that you've just given us, Paul, is that going to go on the agenda, on the minutes, is it? It didn't go out in our papers. Where does it sit in terms of having that information available to us and to the public subsequently?
Yeah, just to confirm, that's item 2 in the agenda
Oh,
that Paul's
sorry.
just read through. So all of that information is in our agenda.
Oh, okay. I missed it. Sorry. Thank you.
That's all right. Councillor Mawson.
With respect to what's already been said, you did say that the retail development down Taranau Road is a work in progress, that you're going to update us every 6 weeks. I don't want to jump the gun here, and certainly with what's been said about privacy. I'm just aware that we have been approached with a previous development that was outside of the CBD and raising concerns about the amount of pressure it would put on their businesses. I'm just wondering, you did say that you're not really after any sort of boutique retail in there and so forth. What if they chose to go ahead with that sort of thing? What sort of power would we have to actually turn around and say that's not what was asked for?
In the application, they have specified what sort of activities they're looking at. We will look to, if there is an approval, we will look to refine that with conditions, which will hopefully specify exactly what, not down to the actual name of the retailer, but what products we want to see being retailed from that property. We're very, Napier's not a huge city in terms of its commercial assets, and we need to protect.
I just want to jump in there. I think we're just getting into a little bit of dangerous territory here of prejudging an application, and I appreciate Paul's trying to be helpful here, but I don't know if that's the right flavour. We will do it on its merits, and so it will have to come and be evaluated against what we've got in front of us in terms of the district plan policy and the rules that apply there, and that'll have to come through when the time is right. At the moment, we're still in the further information gathering based on the questions around how that might lie with other commercial areas.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Crown.
Through you, Madam Chair. One question and one comment. So my question is based on my lack of general knowledge. So in regards to the proposed lifestyle village, it says the application is currently on hold as the applicant decides whether to proceed with notification. Is there a time frame or a time limit on that? How does the process work in regards to them making that sort of decision?
No, well, council have made the decision to publicly notify it. The applicants just said they want some time to consider their options.
Okay.
So I'm not aware of any time limit.
So no time limit, it's just open when they come back to us is...
Yeah.
Yep, okay, cool. And just picking up on Councillor Bogue's comments, I also think this is a great addition to the information sharing for us and for the public in our community. But perhaps we could put some criteria around the types of consents that are being presented to us in this way. I agree with Councillor Bogue. Some of the community housing developments are of very high interest to our community. If we put some criteria around these things, then perhaps it'll be easier for you to prepare which ones are going to come to us in these papers.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, given it's our first item, it's a kind of a learning curve for me as well. So,
sure. Thank you, Paul.
Yep. Thank you, Paul. Any other questions from Councillor Tapani?
Thank you, through your chair. So I'm going to. This is a question to our councillors and our staff. So nothing specifically related to the paper you've presented today. Thank you for the information you've brought to council, and I'm grateful for the insight that we've provided around how we could refine that information coming forward. But there are a couple of indicators here, and so I'm asking our team whether or not I can ask. There are implications in some of this activity, and so I'm not interested in delving into this particular consent, but I do want to make sure that indicators are put forward to the district plan team so that we can ensure that changes going forward provide mitigation measures for council to avoid potential concerns that are highlighted in the applications that we're getting here at council. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. And I think what we'll do with that one, that question is we'll take that offline into our workshops around the district plan rules so that we can have that open and frank discussion around what kind of guidance council wants to set on our proposed district plan changes.
Okay, so with your permission, Madam Chair, my concern is, and so not discounting that advice, I just want to refine my question. My concern is that while this is this information is brought for us to inform council, and it's a picture partway along a process that we can't really interfere with. I understand that. So I appreciate the learning we get from that. But there are a couple of things in these consents that I'm a little bit concerned about that I want to make sure that I expect that some of our public will also be concerned with. And so how do we send a signal to our public, given this is a public forum, that we're cognizant of these concerns, that they are already in part of our conversations without actually delving into the consents that are here. And for an example, if you're going to build a gated community within 300 metres of a coastline with rising sea levels and climate change and questions around long-term insurance, where does our district plan and where does we as a council in the future, provide for better protection for our commercial developers and our residents in these spaces. So I'm just wondering, so not to discount your suggestion, I'm quite happy to support that, but would that be the best place for us to get that clarity?
Yeah, I absolutely think that's the best place, but I'll let Mr Miniker, who's obviously across our district plan change, give some further guidance.
Cool.
Through the Chair, I just wanted to support the Chair's comments, the initial comments, which I think are absolutely bang on, is that you're in the process of working up a draft or a proposed district plan, and that has already had a number of workshops where you've traversed all sorts of issues that, you know, in terms of working through how we want to see as a community and a council the city develop and what the district plan will look like, and that is totally the appropriate place to discuss any of those matters. And then when they are all packaged, there is an extensive public consultation process which is actually operating right as we speak, kind of thing, in terms of the public being able to already have a good idea of some of the ideas that are coming from the council in terms of the proposed plan. So from where I sit, I support the Chair's comments in terms of there is a really good process in place for that to be raised, and also an engagement with the public in due course when that proposed plan is considering all these issues and we've got a product to engage with.
Yeah. So I suppose the public message now is if you've got some thoughts, members of the public, around what our sort of city vision and planning and policy should look like, then start working those up, because there is a space coming for where we want to hear all about that and build that into our district plan review. Did you have a follow-up you mentioned?
Yes, so thank you for that, Madam Chair, and Richard, thank you for those responses. My follow-up question was to Richard. Do you have confidence that there are sufficient opportunities for our team to engage with developers so that they know what the indications are from council while we're working on the DP, district plan? So there's a gap. There's what we're doing now, what we'll eventually get to when the district plan is finished, and in between here and there, do our staff have sufficient space and opportunity to engage with developers to ensure that they're aware of where the intentions of council are going, rather than where we're operating now?
Through the Chair, you're probably not going to like my answer, but it is that the district plan is the district plan. So the one we've got is the one that we've got, and that is the one that Paul has been talking about applying to the developments that are coming before us. It's just cold. So we don't influence or suggest or what have you. People that make an application, if you wanted to make an application for a development, you're entitled to be judged by whatever is in the district plan currently, and you need to have that certainty, which is really, really important to developers. They need certainty to be able to invest. So if we have some flexible arrangement where we have idea of the day coming through, that would be carnage. So yeah, it's basically the district plan is what it is, and then you have a chance now through a very, I guess, legal process of advancing a new district plan with rights and checks and balances all the way through to when that district plan ends up from becoming an idea to being an actual operative district plan, and that's where we are, working through that process.
Kia ora, thank you. If I don't have any other further questions from councillors, Paul, just noting, I think you've taken a little bit of direction there from some of the discussion around a few other items of interest that we'll see on our next report.
That's right.
Thank you. So I won't include that in the resolution, but do I have a mover to receive the report? Councillor Wright and Councillor Crown, thank you. Any discussion to the motion?
Just
Councillor Tuffany and Councillor Price.
Thank you, Madam Chair and staff, Richard, for answering our questions. What I picked up from our conversations today was it's absolutely essential for the residents of Napier to be involved in the district plan to ensure that any changes in the future that we wish to see reflected are done so in the consultation that's happening with the district plan. Thank you.
Kia ora. Councillor Price.
I've just got probably a little bit of advice from experience that the liquor licence they're applying for might want to be a bit later if it's a restaurant in weekends. Otherwise, they're going to get it up and running and want to spend money to change it, because 9 o'clock for a restaurant or whatever is pretty early on a weekend. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Price. Beg your pardon? You're right. Okay. With no other discussion, we'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you.
I think that brings us to the end of our paper, our meeting. I'll declare it closed. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Well done.